What is up, fellow sickos? I am an actual sick person in Danville Valley coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes, for our first sort of bounce around of the season where we're going to dive deep into a handful of teams or players, normally between like 2 and 4, just to give more in-depth thoughts and impressions. I will say very quickly before I throw it to Grant, we do have our mega overreaction podcast that will go live on Saturday. So join our Discord. The links in the podcast and YouTube description, and you will be able to submit your own overreaction that might appear at the end of the show that we will respond to. So just another reason to join that Discord and then talk to all the cool people we have in there, especially active during the games that are being played. Mr. Hughes, how the heck are you doing?
Unlike you and your sickness-riddled self, and very much like our guy, our dude Lindy Waters, I'm thriving. Are you aware of what's happening with Lindy Waters, Dan? We've turned him from a bit into a superstar.
I would like to pat myself on the back to the point of dislocating my shoulder for saying how many teams should trade for him before the Warriors actually did. He did dunk the Pelicans into the G League, I think. But I guess, do we want to start? You said one of the teams you wanted to start with or talk about today was Golden State. So do you want to talk about Golden State?
Yeah, I mean, I figure watching every minute of every game, so I might as well, we might as well repurpose that for.
Well, hold on.
Little check-in.
We don't watch games around here. Let's not.
Those are the only games I watch. That's it. Yeah, like, so I don't know. Obviously, the headlining is that Steph Curry sprained his ankle twice in the span of like a quarter a couple nights ago and went out, and it was both non-contact. I don't know if have you seen the clips of it where it was just like didn't step on anyone's foot, just like trying to move around like a normal person, rolled it over.
My first thought was, I'm still not sure if he's worth that 4-year, $44 million extension they gave him.
Yeah. Everybody from what 10 plus years ago now is like, see, he's never going to stay healthy. So yeah, that was, I mean, it's nothing you haven't seen just several times before, and it seems like a fairly minimal absence is in store. And man, like, of course that obviously matters, but the story for this team of the early season is just, and everybody's picked up on this. Like, I think it was obvious in the preseason, so no kudos for anyone that's just now coming around to these facts. But like, this team is super deep. Lindy Waters does mean you have 13 guys that can actually play. He was unbelievable. I just want the number. So the Warriors beat the Pelicans the night before we're recording this, and Waters just like, I want to find his game log because it's just, I know his rebounds were. What's that?
It was filthy. The stat line
was unbelievable. So just here are the numbers, and then we could talk about like just how this is happening. This may just all be about Lindy Waters. 21 points on 8 of 13, 3 of 7 from 3. That seems low. 8 rebounds is a career high, 4 assists, a steal, no turnovers. He's a plus 26 in 30 minutes in an 18-point win for the Warriors. So like, he's definitely symptomatic. He's a symptom of like what is just happening on Golden State, which is the ball is moving in ways that like it just really hasn't for several years. And that's partly by necessity because there just aren't guys you have to slow the offense down to force shots to. Honestly, I think a lot of it is the influence of Brandon Podziemski, who just, his playing style is like so frenetic and quick and just kind of also bordering on chaotic a lot of the time that it just like, if you're on the floor with him, you're almost infected and like you just sort of pick it up a little bit. So the ball moves better. Everybody's hustling on defense. It's not all him, but he is a league leading plus 76 plus minus on the season, despite shooting like 18% from 3, maybe it's 19%, and under 40% from the field.
Yeah, because he hit 3 of them against the Pels, right? That was probably his best shooting performance of the year.
And like the shooting and the scoring for him is a real problem, but he's so good at everything else and so good at what seems to be like an intangible ability to just like lift the intensity of teammates. It's worth it. Even if he's going to shoot under 40% from the field, like it's just, the payoff is there. The plus minus is not, it's been a year plus now where that's just a thing. And I don't think it's magic. So yeah, I mean, the depth is unbelievable. Buddy Hield I texted somebody the other day, like Buddy Hield shoots every shot as if he's never missed a shot before. And it's just like, they come off the same level of confidence. He's so thirsty for shots. He chases the ball wherever it goes. It's just like it's a fun time because the Warriors are winning in ways that they haven't really in a long time. The defense is super chaotic. They're forcing more turnovers than anyone in the league. They have the highest transition frequency in the league, and those two things are very much related because they just get the ball and take off. The Jonathan Kuminga stuff, maybe we can talk about, but I mean, pretty like hard to be more optimistic just based on like, how bleak this season could have looked. Maybe, if it had gone the way that many thought, where it was they don't have a second star, everything's too dependent on Curry. Draymond's getting old. Like, there were some real downsides here, but I do think this is about as exciting and fun and encouraging as you could have really realistically hoped for. 3-1 through 4 games, pretty solid start.
Is there? I mean, I think the overarching question here would be: are the Golden State Warriors as constructed potential contenders or outright contenders? And I think when you look at their defense specifically, you mentioned a lot of the stuff. They and the Oklahoma City Thunder are currently the only teams that rank in the top 5 of opponent shooting percentage at both the rim and from the 3-point line. And we know that 3-point defense there's just so much noise in there. The deflection they're getting it's all over the place. I do think some of their success might be predicated on, well, how healthy is DeAnthony Melton going to be moving forward because his back issues already flared up. We're so early into the season. I think we could say I don't necessarily know what to make of this team's ceiling right now, but like, how good can this team be as currently constructed?
That is the question, because you wonder if the things that have led to so much success really just go down the line, like tend to be things that we say mean less in the playoffs, depth being the first one, right? Like in the postseason, you just play your best guys more. And so this advantage the Warriors have in, say, second quarters and the beginning of fourth quarters, where they just have better players on the floor because their reserves are better than yours, like that may just go away. So that's one. Two, like winning games by just disorganizing things and creating chaos, you would imagine is just harder against, playoff teams that, one, are playing their best players, and two, are just going to be better able to handle, like, being sped up or being forced into like difficult shots where, and let's remember too, the Warriors did not exactly face a murderer's row to start the season. Like the Pelicans even are beat up, and that's the best team they've played. So you get you lose to the Clippers, but you also get Portland and Utah, right? I think those, like, okay, so what are we even judging it on? I do think there are real questions about whether any of this is like postseason, like is viable in the postseason or will be anywhere nearly as effective. But this was a team we weren't really sure was going to make the postseason in the first place. So I do think the silver lining is that all this stuff should continue to work during the year. And then at least the Warriors will have the opportunity to prove or disprove like how valuable this stuff is in the playoffs. Because that certainly wasn't a given, right? We were kind of on the fence, like when you're going down the playoff list in the West.
I already forgot where I had them. I'm sure it was in the play-in or out of it.
It was one of the things where it's like, who can you guarantee is better? Like guarantee. And there were 3 or 4 teams, but then it's like, who can you guarantee they'll be better than? And it's like Utah and Portland, maybe the Clippers. Like that was kind of it.
I think we threw the Spurs in there. I think
they're probably the Spurs. Yeah. But yeah, I think the playoff viability of all this stuff is really still a lingering question. But for now, just, stick with what's working and see where it gets you. And then maybe it falls apart, when the stakes raise and maybe you surprise somebody. I don't know.
I want to ask you about the Jonathan Kuminga of it all, but I really wanted to boil it down to just 2 things, as in, what is something that you view as the most unsustainable about this team? And like, what is the one surprising trend that you're kind of buying? And I will say my biggest concern, or not, I don't want to look at this and say it's the offense writ large, but I do question, and you mentioned this already, that maybe this could be more of a playoff concern. The fact that they're 7th in points scored per possession, but Kevon Looney is the player on this team that has seen the largest share of his shots go unassisted so far, is wild to me. And I think even as of right now, when you look at generally these real NBA contenders and most of these, I would say all of these top offenses, with the exception of perhaps, what Denver's supposed to be, is that they have 2 guys who just can go generate shots on their own. And I'm not saying that you need to hit all these unassisted buckets, but you're going to normally look and see, oh, these guys rank in the top 20 or top 25 of unassisted points generated.
Mhm.
And with the Warriors right now, Kuminga and Looney are the only two players that we've seen that have most of their made shots going unassisted,
Yeah.
which is like it's never Steph has always kind of hovered on the line of that because of all the stuff he does off the ball. And so I think you throw him in there when he's healthy. Hot take, Steph is really good. Like, so you can say that. But after that, I'm just curious. It's like, okay, how does this offense sustain long term is my biggest concern. I do say on the buying side, I'm very interested to hear what you have to say, by the way. I think I'm buying too much of what I'm seeing on the defensive end to the point of like, I feel like I should feel as if it's more sustainable, but the energy, the chaos that they're playing with right now, and just the personnel that they have, is it a matter of, well, you're not overextending anybody? And I said this to listener B Rich during the Pelicans game. I said, this is really spicy, but when Draymond Green is available, he's pretty good.
Yeah. I think I guess one thing where we should just stick to our priors it is on the issue of the second like dynamic, doesn't need any help scoring threat, because that's still just a thing. And that does tie to Kuminga. Has not at all been that guy so far. And Wiggins has looked better in that capacity, but I just don't like, if you're relying on Andrew Wiggins to be like a singular offensive creator, like consistently and reliably, often as a first option, depending on the lineups, like that's just, you can't, that's not a functional way to play NBA offense. So that I think is I guess you'd then sell some of the offensive effectiveness because it has been so predicated on ball movement and just mathing it and shooting a ton of threes and getting all these transition looks that are really built by the defense. And so I'm with you. I would buy the defense being really disruptive and deep and being able to speed games up and make them like messy in favorable ways. I do think Ivica Zubac showed that this team is vulnerable to real size, though. Like they hadn't really seen a ton of that outside of the Clippers game. The Pelicans, obviously, like actually even Yves Missi had some moments against the Warriors in that first of the back-to-backs with New Orleans.
He's looked pretty good overall.
We
dismissed every Pelicans big on the roster.
I was going to say, is he making you? We don't need to go into the Pelicans, but like, is he making you reevaluate because it was just, you couldn't talk about the Pelicans without talking about the need for a center and how this roster is unfinished. Is Missi changing that? And if so, to what degree for you?
As an aside, one, I was panicking when Javonte Green went down against the Warriors, but it seemed like he was okay. So we power on.
Well, Herb Jones hurt his shoulder too. Brandon Pajemski's diving on everybody. That was a risky play.
Also looked, I'm surprised it didn't pop out. I was actually a little bit shocked about that. I will say, I don't really want to go too into it, but failing any major changes before we record our overreactions, I am so out on this New Orleans Pelicans offense overall.
Fascinating. Okay.
So Yves Missi's performance has not made me feel any better about them. I just look at their shot profile, the process that they're going through on offense, the talent, and look, they're 22nd in points per possession as we record this. So the Pelicans are the team that I'm highest on relative to consensus every single offseason heading into the regular season. And then normally they kind of float my boat until like January, and we're in November-ish. And I'm kind of I'm not feeling great. And maybe I'd feel better if DeJounte Murray was there, but the Missi breakout or serviceability has not made me feel any differently about their situation.
Okay. It makes me feel a little better, but like, he's not the solution to your problems. Like, that's just,
honestly, it would make me feel better if they just had anyone on this team that was comfortable taking a pull-up three. And I know Trey Murphy's injured and DeJounte Murray's injured, but like even the good Brandon Ingram moments, because they come so independent of Zion, or we're watching Zion set a screen for Brandon Ingram to take a contested two-pointer. I mean, just look at, I hate to oversimplify this, but look at the math against the Warriors. Would they make 22 threes against the Pelicans? The Pelicans took 21 or something like that. I mean, and stop with they'll eventually shoot more threes. Like, it's over. We've been there. We've held out hope for it. The personnel hasn't changed enough for it. It's weird to be down on a team that still just has so much talent and isn't by any means. I don't think that they suck. I'm just so over their offensive process. And the other thing here is they're playing slower, it feels like. And when you don't have the half court offense to like kind of prop up these going up against set defenses, run, God damn it, just run more. And so when I last checked, they were 27th in offensive efficiency after opponent makes. And so it's like, if you're giving defenses a chance to get set, not even having Zion Williamson is saving you, at least the overall outlook right now. So
Yeah.
this is about the Warriors, though, which I'm buying I think specifically on defense, it does feel like the turnover generation, which, as you've mentioned, is fueling a lot of their offense because of the speed at which they could play and the time they spend in transition. I think I'm all the way buying that aspect of their start. I just look at this team, and I hate that it comes back to this. We need to get to Jonathan Kuminga. What have you made of his performance? The decision of Kerr to not only bench him, but to bench him on a night when Steph Curry was out, I thought was fascinating. What is what have you made of all of this?
I mean, I will say first, I totally understand the benching. If and this seems to be the case, the Warriors are just going to play like nobody's like guaranteed minutes. It's just going to really, in theory, go to who's earning them. And Kuminga was just not a part of all the positive things I mentioned earlier about how the Warriors are playing across their first three games. Like it was really jarring that you'd see all this incredible ball movement, all of this hustle, all this like intuitive, connected play. And then there was Kuminga, right? Like, and the ball would get to him, it would stop, he'd bobble it. I really do think we could just kind of free range this. Like, I assume he's pressing. I assume the lack of an extension is like a factor because it just, the things he was struggling with, of which there were many, were just like he looked like a rookie again for stretches, just like uncertain, hesitant, not really understanding where he fit in this movement offense. And like, if you want to be alarmist about it, you can definitely make the case that like he just isn't, in his worst moments, he is not like a system player. And normally that's a pejorative if you say someone's a system player, but I use the term to mean like he can function within like a free flowing offense where there are quick reads and there's nothing predetermined and you don't stop things to get into your bag. You just the 0.5 offense stuff. Like, I really think there's a lot of evidence to suggest like he just isn't cut out for that. And he wants to be the guy that the possession stops, he has it at the top and he tries to beat his matchup like that. That I feel like is the type of player he wants to be. And maybe is the type of player is the only type of player he can be. He's 22. He looked much better against New Orleans, especially in the second half, where he did seem to be much more a part of like the collective, like, holy shit, these guys are playing hard and running and doing all this stuff. But for the most part, he has been like operating independently of all the rest of that good stuff. And that's when he's looked worst. So the benching, I totally get. I think way too much is being made that it was done over text message. I feel like Kerr texted him and explained like,
we're in 2025, basically.
Right. Like I think that become like getting into the news cycle was just like, I understand it because obviously there is some kind of disconnect between Kuminga and the team and Kerr.
Oh yeah.
But like, I don't feel like that's, much of anything. But like, if he continues to not start, it wouldn't surprise me. And like, he hasn't deserved it, honestly. Like, based just on his play to this point, that's bad news for him if he wants a big contract, for the Warriors who need him to be better than he is. But I think if you have watched all 4 of the Warriors games that they've played so far, I think any rational person would conclude like Kuminga has not played well enough to deserve a starting spot, like unless and until he fits in better and earns it back. Like, maybe that's harsh, but that's just the reality of what we've seen so far.
I think that's totally fair. And I'm wondering how much, I mean, the contract situation has to factor into it in the sense of this is someone who passed on $30 million a year or so. And so in your head, you're probably putting a ton of pressure on yourself, but your mindset is also, I have to perform so I get paid now. But the other aspect of it is too, I wonder how much of it is tied to, okay, we saw the preseason 3-point shooting and like volume and efficiency. Both of that has been yanked all the way down. And also when you look at his drives per third, this is the thing that I found. I do agree with you about the whole he's operating separately, but even when he has kind of made the quick decisions on drives, his drives per 36 minutes are down overall. And it still feels like he's running into just these congested lanes, which is fascinating to me from the perspective of Golden State has been getting up a lot of threes. I think they're 5th in 3-point attempt rate. I think they've been hitting them to start the season as well. Have they not? So they're 4th in 3-point attempt rate and they're 5th in 3-point percentage, but defenses don't seem to care. And maybe it's, I guess that's the benefit of moving him to the bench is, do you take him out of the lineup in which he was most awkward. And okay, he might still see minutes in that lineup, but it won't be as many minutes. Is that kind of a lot? Like, what have you kind of made of that? Like, even that part of his game where it's, oh, it feels like he's catching and going quickly, but these are drives to nowhere.
It's hard to describe. Like I imagine if you really like parse the synergy data or whatever, like with his touch time and like where he's getting it on the floor, you could maybe come to some sort of more like analytically sound explanation for what's happening. I would just say it really feels like he's catching the ball and it's like there's enough of a moment of hesitation, which I think is compounded by he's just overthinking because of the contract stuff. Like, can you imagine? Like, he's just out there thinking, I gotta prove it. You know, this is a prove it season officially now. I gotta do something great. And like that on top of his like natural tendency to not just make a decision is like the offense just like shudders for a second. And then the defense, you know, knows that's the other thing is there's not like a lot of deceptive anything in his game. It's like he's going downhill, you know, there's not going to be a lot of cleverness. It's going to be fairly easy to see. And he's a good enough athlete that he can just power through over, around, whatever. But the delays and the like just bobbling the ball, it's all just slowing it down. So like that affects the rhythm of the offense and it affects his drives. It makes it so like he's maybe not driving hard right when the opening's there. It's that split second slows it down, and then like Yves Missi comes out of nowhere and like swats him out of bounds, which is what happened in the first half last night as we're recording this. Yeah, it's early. The signs are discouraging, but I think the good news, at least again to circle back for the regular season at least, is like the Warriors got options. Like if this is how Kuminga is going to play, they just don't need the guy.
They got Lindy Waters at home.
They got Lindy Waters, man.
He's a center. Wow. He's a center.
Why would you buy the Kuminga when you get the Lindy Waters for free or something?
Do you think he's going to have this is the last thing. Is he going to have a regular role moving forward? Like, because it gets into the perimeter of it all gets tough when it's easier when two players, especially when Steph, who plays so many minutes, is out, but when Steph and Melton are both out.
That's the thing. Like, I mean, you don't want to say like, I'm sure, well, they're just always going to have 2 or 3 guys hurt. So, you know, the 13-man rotation turns into 9 and that's totally fine. Like, I do think it's realistic to expect, you know, Draymond will take nights off. Anytime Steph is hurt, they're going to give him 2 extra games to get better, you would assume. And, you know, but it's going to be really hard to get like guys like Waters, and even obviously Moses Moody again, like what's the guy got to do? Like it's the same thing. But like Gary Payton II has been ahead of both of those guys in the rotation. And he's been just like an insanely disruptive, perfect example of the guy that's like making the quick decisions in the flow of the offense type thing. Like he's been good and he's deserved to play. And Kevon Looney has been good and deserves to play. So it's just like Waters is the last guy on the bench that, you know, other than your 2 ways and stuff. But like, I guess I would just say, there will be more games like that New Orleans game where he comes in and is just like, that guy's a fucking NBA rotation player. Right. Like there's no question about it. He's a ball, like he can really help any team. And sometimes like he didn't win them the game, but he was integral in them erasing a 20-point deficit and winning comfortably. Like that was a real thing that happened. And I don't think like it's not the last we're going to hear, certainly on this podcast, of one Lindy Waters.
The other thing, super quickly here, there's probably something to, at least during the regular season, who are the heavy minutes guys? Like, who do you want? Not even who do you trust? You don't even want Steph playing heavy minutes at this age. And so it's, if you got to spread the love, and it gets awkward, I guess, when you're ripping some from Kuminga to like, oh, can we find a little bit more for Lindy Waters? We're going to pull from Kuminga. Maybe we got to pull even more from Melton, who wasn't necessarily playing a crap ton of minutes to begin with. But it's that just, you have to manage some of these guys where it's like, I would say Draymond, Steph, and Buddy Hield has played heavy minutes before, but defensively, do you want him on the court? So maybe their regular season, I don't look at this team and say they need a consolidation trade. Do I know whether they're a contender is currently constructed? My answer is going to default to no, but but man, they are way feistier than I was expecting.
Yep. I think that's probably where to leave it. I mean, Podziemski, the minutes thing, leads the team at 27 a game. So it's just like it would be fascinating if they just
Taylor Jenkins innovating. No one can average 30.
Right. Well, yeah, the Grizzlies are doing that too. It would be really interesting maybe this is the response to the whole, like, there's too many games, the season's too long. It's like, all right, cool. We're just never going to play anyone 30 minutes a night. That's just depth is going to be the new market inefficiency. Seems unlikely, but that's what it's looking like. Do you want to
Do
talk
you want to
about, can we do
cover?
a Knicks check-in? I would like
All
to
right,
hear.
you want to stick small market? I think that's fair.
Yeah, let's stick small market teams that nobody cares about.
What is your question or questions about this team? I can't imagine that you have any.
Well, the first is, how can you describe to me your concern level for the whole Karl-Anthony Towns experience and what facets of it do or do not concern you so far? Because there's a few issues, some that he was supposed to fix that he hasn't, and some that he was not supposed to fix that he also hasn't.
So my concern level probably skews toward alarmist right now, and that just might be me because of my Knicks fandom just kind of bleeding out here. Let's start with the offense. I think he still has an effect. Like the lanes are more open for Jalen Brunson than they have been last season. What I don't understand, and I do think it's been oversimplified a little bit, he's taking, as we record this, 2 3-pointers per game, Mr. Grant Hughes.
What
That is,
I gotta stop you. How is that happening? Like how?
oh,
Like
I'm about to get into it.
please.
One, he's being too passive overall. So I've seen both sides where it's this dude just needs to be more aggressive and take more shots. And then you have well, actually, how are the Knicks supposed to generate better looks or more looks for him? They're both right, but anyone who's kind of being condescending and saying you can't just say he needs to take more shots, no, you absolutely fucking can. This guy's taking 11.6 shots per 36 minutes, which would be a career low. He absolutely just needs to take more shots. What I do think there's room for more nuance on, and from DJ Ace, NBA from Knicks Film School, I thought had a really astute tweet on this, is that the Knicks need to bump up Cat's 3-point volume almost by force, having him run off these like off-ball screening actions. And so, just shout out to DJ for pointing that out. The Knicks, that's never really been their MO under Tom Thibodeau, let alone for a big guy. And maybe that's something they're still getting used to. The other on offense that I've taken issue with is he's yet I'm going to put it this way. He has taken as many fourth quarter threes as Jericho Sims and Ariel Huckporty combined, which is to say 0. And so when you're looking down the stretch specifically, when you're looking at what the Knicks are doing, they kind of have him going down low without setting a screen. And so it's, is he going to try and seal guys off when Jalen Brunson is coming off of a screen? No. So I don't understand the Knicks' offensive process, particularly down the stretch of those games. What they've also done more this season, and hat tip to John Macri, also of Knicks Film School, for pointing this out, they've gotten mismatch hunting more. And it hasn't, their offense is third in points scored per possession. So you look at it and say it's not the problem. It is, and I'm filtering out the Celtics game, Grant. So I don't want to hear, one game still skews it because we're talking about 2, but I took out the Celtics game. They're 27th in points scored per possession in the fourth quarter. We've talked about this time and again with the Knicks, but way before Tibbs, but even under Tibbs, there does feel like there's a lack of movement and innovation to it. And so that I don't necessarily lay at Karl-Anthony Towns' feet, but there also is, you need to be a little bit more aggressive, especially from beyond the arc, or at least make quicker decisions with the ball. And I don't need to see him. This is not the theory of this team, is not like we really need to, if you want Karl-Anthony Towns down low, put him in lineups exclusively without Jalen Brunson that are going to lack the creation necessary. If you put him in the post or at the elbows, him rolling off of a screen, fine. Like that's part of the process, but I view that as clogging the floor at this point because of what you peddled this team as 5 out. And it's really, if you're playing Josh Hart, has like 8 injuries going on, it's really 4.5 out. Before we get into the defense, do you have any thoughts about, again, we're talking about a team that right now ranks 3rd in offensive efficiency, but filtering out that Celtics game, because it would probably be, I don't know if it'd be worse or better. I didn't even look at it with the Celtics game because I don't care. You're 27th in fourth quarters. And, the games that you've lost, like losing to the Cavs specifically, your offensive process was dog shit down the stretch of that game.
I guess like it's way too early. Like I'm starting to parse the lineup data and on off stuff. And then I catch myself and I was like, we're talking about like fewer than 100 minutes for most guys. Like
they lost the trade. It's over. Let's move on.
Well, I was saying, like, anecdotally, which is where I feel like I have to default to this early for the most part and forget some of the numbers. It just seems like the issues that were foreseeable, even with Cat on offense, again, we don't need to spend all this time on the offense because it hasn't been a problem, relatively speaking, but it continues to feel like Brunson is just like so overly important to everything. Like it just, he gives the ball up and it's an immediate like go get it back, because whoever he gives it to just feels, I don't know if it's being, if this is like a coaching point of emphasis for them, like just let's get it back in his hands and like restart the clock because he's a live dribble again, or if it's a hesitation on the part of, the Ananobis and Bridges and whoever else. But it does just continue to feel like the, I mean, I can't sit here and make the case that like if they just held on to Julius Randle, we wouldn't be running into this, because I just like that's crazy. But well, I guess I'd throw it to you. Does it feel as if even with Towns, everything still just starts and stops with Brunson? And like, if anything, the team's lack of depth now after the trades and losses in free agency makes that even like, that's a big preseason prior for us, right? Like Brunson's too important. Like, has anything that you've seen changed that, like that stance?
No, I mean, look, Mikal Bridges is making me feel a little better. I will say that I was pretty nervous about him heading into the season, and it's not like he's, shooting the lights out, but the fact that he's hovering around 36% from threes and hasn't really he's had one, like I would say really good performance for them. But when it comes to just generating offense, like there's always going to need, unless you're the Warriors, apparently, like there's going to need to be the one player or the two players who are generating your offense. I mean, even OKC Thunder, they've been great to start the season. Their offense has been, when efficiency wise, lackluster, because they're still, we got to wait and see more of J-Dub and Chet Holmgren, but like they still don't have that. It's a similar situation to the Knicks, where maybe you feel better about it for them because one, their defense, and two, they have two of these up and coming guys. Mm-hmm. But you look at it and say, okay, well, who is just that? That's the second guy who can generate offense, not just for himself, but everybody else. The Knicks don't have that. Even if you think, and look, they're third in offense, and Karl-Anthony Towns will figure it out. That was going to be kind of the moral of the story. Mm-hmm. I'm probably going to be wrong about him attempting a career high of 3-pointers, but I do think the volume will come up. I think they'll figure it out. This trade happened basically during training camp, so there's a level of this thing needs time, but I do believe you are seeing some of the limitations of the Knicks offense down the stretch specifically, and maybe it's a little different if Brunson's not battling his own injury, but again, I don't want to belabor this point because, as you mentioned, we talked about it in preseason. You emptied the asset clip basically and left yourself more dependent than ever on this one player. And it's a testament to Jalen Brunson, but it's also just that one player. Name the one player. I don't care who, Luka Doncic. I don't care who it is. Shea himself. That's a risky proposition. And what I've yet to see from the Knicks on offense, and maybe that's now we can get into the defense. I don't understand what the contingencies are beyond Jalen Brunson being just the only central nervous system to it. And maybe Tibbs will change some of his lineup patterns. I guess you could talk about like, well, they're like kind of banged up, but having a Precious Achiuwa or Mitchell Robinson back, like that'll help your defense, which has been, again, even filtering out the Celtics game. By the way, the Knicks defense has actually been pretty good. Like they had moments against the Cavs. They definitely had moments against the Pacers. But do you have anything to add on the offense? I think that the Knicks will find more of an equilibrium on offense, but I don't think that the concerns that we have, and that I would argue fans understand it. They might be more okay with it. If you're really just locked into the Knicks more than we are, you might be more okay with it than us. But I think it's been in the backs of at least everyone's minds, if not the forefront of them. And I don't know. I think that's why if they're going to ever make a trade, and I'm not saying it needs to be a big one, it probably, I've talked about like, it'd be nice to have some extra wing depth, or do you want to get a more bankable center, like outside of outside of Mitchell Robinson, the guy behind Karl-Anthony Towns or beside him? It might just you need some type of, like, who is this season? Are we bringing back Alec Burks? Like, he's getting into the Miami Heat type deal.
Yeah. I did want to just pivot to the defense, because I guess I was going to ask you, like, is there anybody that, outside of Deuce McBride, that has come off the bench that has given you any sense of like, okay, there's a little more here than I thought? I thought like Hukporti even has had moments, and that's not someone who was on my radar at all prior to the season. But if you're pointing to him as someone that's like made a big difference, then man, all the depth concerns really are just very well founded and playing out.
I'm kind of looking at Pacome Dadier. We've seen a little bit of his, like, he's a little bit shiftier than I thought, like against the NBA level comp. But I don't think you look at this bench outside of, and even look at the injured guys. I don't think you look at Mitchell Robinson or Precious Achiuwa if they're going to be coming off the bench, and they make you feel a crap ton better about this team. However, if you are concerned about the defense, which I think they're probably like close to last in the league when you include the Celtics game, but when you're looking at just the Cavs and Pacers, they're sixth. So that's how much one game can swing stats right now, but it's also how much they can swing our impressions. Defensively, though, what I've been concerned about is I don't think that they're using Karl-Anthony Towns like in his by the way, I do think a lot of it is on him, and the Knicks have forced, like, they've had stretches where it seems like they're playing hyper aggressive on defense. But if you're going to put him, we've seen him, I feel like I know there's only technically 3 levels to a basketball court, but it feels like we've seen him in 17 different levels of drop coverage now, to where he's just like, and I don't know if that's by design or he's just not.
When is a drop not a drop?
Yeah. So, but he has not, by and large, there's been possessions, but he has by and large not fared well there. And I don't know if that's more about his surroundings. You could say it's an effort thing, but if you're going to have him consistently, like, in this, you're going to consistently have him in these inconsistent drops to where, like, okay, well, how far is he dropping? And is that by designers? And that's what I don't know yet. And I don't know that I've seen Tibbs talk about this. He wasn't in very much of a talking mood after the Cavs game when you look at the post-game comments. And that's where I would be concerned. Now, Grant, here's a fascinating stat. Filter out the Celtics game. Again, I'm throwing this out. Can you guess what opponents are shooting at the rim against Karl-Anthony Towns? By opponents, I mean the Cavs and Pacers.
I'm going to guess.
Over or under 65%?
Oh, gosh. I was not going to go that high. I guess I better go over based on the tone of what you're saying.
It's over. They are 12 of 12, 100%. And I went back and watched all of them. There were like a couple like really good contests that just, it's like, okay, you tip your cap and you move on.
They should be 10 of 12.
He's just not, most of the time, it feels like, not in the right position. And I think that's troubling, where you've seen him in some like mid to deep drops where it's, well, okay, like at least B, but teams are targeting him also on the defensive end. Like, they've gone after him. And I just wonder, what is the solution to hit the play better button for Karl-Anthony Towns? Or is it, we need to decommit from any type of drops? Again, I do think the Knicks have varied up some of the stuff that they've done, but do you need to just say, I don't have this belief that Karl-Anthony Towns, because as of right now, the personnel that you have, unless you're going to play him against Mitchell Robinson, this ain't changing. Like, you've seen him in your quote unquote best lineup. So what more is it made? Like, if you think Deuce McBride is going to be a better fit defensively than Jalen Brunson, okay, yeah, sure. Good luck generating offense with that lineup. So, and you would never bench Jalen Brunson, obviously. I'm just saying, you're not going to get better defensive talent around him unless you start him alongside Mitchell Robinson and maybe bring Josh Hart off the bench, which at this point, again, we need more evidence, because they've been okay against the Cavs and Pacers for extended stretches. The Cavs had some of their moments, and man, Evan Mobley looks good this year.
Boy, he
handled a lot better. Yeah. But that's where I'm at with the defense, is we need more evidence. And I would honestly say I'm more concerned with Karl-Anthony Towns' performance on offense thus far. And I think part of that with defense is, okay, well, we kind of knew that he wasn't going to solve things on defense. And the other thing is, I'm struggling on defense more in a good way to understand how much of that is on the team versus Cat, whereas I think you look at the offensive end and it's very clearly both.
Yeah. I mean, I think we talked about this angle a little bit when we went, through the pluses and minuses of that trade. The Knicks really did create like a blinking green light, like, go at this, when they essentially paired Cat and Brunson as a pick and roll defensive duo, right? Like, that's because you're certainly, I mean, it's almost by default too, because you're not going to run anything at Anunoby or Bridges. And so when you just have if you get a 1-5 pick and roll against the Knicks, the way it's being defended right now, and with the personnel they can put out there, it's like, that's a pretty high value approach, and maybe, like, what do you think about the Knicks? Just like, let's look at what Denver did to make it so Nikola Jokic is a functional defensive center on a contender. Like, is it just, you got to be up at the level, and then you can sort of lean on OG and Bridges on the back line to scramble around and help? Or like Towns, I worry about bringing up to the level because of he'll reach, and he'll get into foul trouble out there. That's been a huge bugaboo for him forever. So, like, you can't drop him. You bring him up to the level frequently, you might just play him off the floor because he's going to get 3 fouls in the first quarter. Like it's going to be really interesting to see like who. And then there's the whole like Thibodeau wants to play a certain way defensively. Like he's the inventor of icing pick and rolls. Like that's just he's much more flexible in the intervening years. But you know what I mean? Like I think you really just got to look around the league at like how do other teams make this work with like because the Brook Lopez plan is not gonna happen. Like you can't just have Cat drop and have his length bother shooter. Like that isn't gonna work.
I've thought a lot about the way Denver. I don't know why I'm saying a lot. We're a few games into the season, but I've thought about the Jokic point about how they use him. And even this season, I think they're still 11th in defensive efficiency. And Michael Porter Jr., whose defense I praise coming out of the championship run during moments last year, has been an atrocity by and large on that end of the floor. And because my point was, you're talking about having, if you're Denver, the setup is, well, we have reliable guys who can be the low men, but also like that we're not going to sacrifice anything at the perimeter. Right now, you're kind of in that situation, but I guess they still, you look at Peyton Watson, Christian Brown, Aaron Gordon, there's still enough. Now you look at the Knicks, there's Mikal Bridges, there's OG Anunoby. If you use those guys in that type of a role, then it's okay. Well, what's happening up top with Towns? Because you still have Jalen Brunson to target there. And Jalen Brunson's not as good as of a defender as the best version or the medium version of Jamal Murray on that end of the floor. There's a size differential there.
The size as much as anything. Yeah.
So I wonder, and then you mentioned Nikola Jokic is better at staying out of foul trouble. He's also at this point in his career better at playing kind of like both sides of the pick and roll, I think. So I don't know what the answer is, but I do, and I don't know who to blame. Even is this on Towns, or is it Tibbs has yet to do enough adjusting to the personnel that's there? Or is he kind of looking at it from the perspective of, well, I'm eventually just going to start Mitchell Robinson next to him. But then also, aren't you still going to have to change the way you're kind of defending if you're playing with those two centers?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, I think probably the most charitable thing we could do is say it's been a handful of games and this was a massive like roster altering trade that happened with basically no time for the team to adjust to it. And we should just assume whatever the extremes are, we'll just kind of get more towards the middle as we go. Like,
wrap it up with this concern level for the Knicks on a scale of 3 games into their season on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm probably at like a 3.7 to like 4.5.
Yeah, I think, and it might be higher if you went into the season thinking they were like anywhere close to the Celtics OKC tier of like top threat contenders. Like I think because it's irrational to get much higher than you've said this early, but it's like I'm not seeing a lot that suggests like even when this gets going perfectly, it's going to get the Knicks up to that level, which is fine. Like not everybody can be that, but yeah, I'd be right around there with you.
Do you want to move one more team?
Okay,
so you want to hit those quick? Would you like to stick small market?
Yeah, let's stick really small market. And there's this team called the Lakers. I don't know if you are familiar.
Isn't
used to
Jackson
be in Minneapolis
on that team, right?
Yes,
the Jackson Hayes team. Okay.
Two things here. I guess I don't know how much more like championship equity to kind of piggyback off the last little Knicks point the Lakers have, but it does through the early going feel to me like they're quite a bit better than some of the teams that we thought maybe they'd be kind of knocking around against for the 7, 8, 9, 10 spots in the West. And that's kind of remarkable because like this roster is not different unless you count Gabe Vincent being healthy as like a meaningful change, or Taurean Prince being gone being a meaningful change. Like it really to me is it's so risky to say like, oh, JJ Redick's got him like working perfectly and stuff. It's it's been a few games, but it is pretty clear.
I'm sorry to interject, but JJ Redick was watching film at the car wash.
I did hear about that. What a sicko. I bet I've watched NBA film like getting my oil changed before. I'm not an NBA coach. I'm not impressed. So I think he's at least got the big stuff handled. And a lot of it was sort of as advertised, where Anthony Davis is going to touch the ball early and often. It's going to be, we'll give it to him and it'll move and he'll get it back. Like just more touches is the highest usage rate he's had since like 16, 17, when he was just really the guy with the Pelicans. His scoring average is up over 30. The shot profile is not like, this is the other thing. You look at the Lakers year over year numbers and really like, they're just making more shots. Like their shot profile is not super different. It's just the offense looks smoother. Anthony Davis is making more shots. He's taking more shots. He's more involved. Austin Reeves looks basically like the handcuffs came off. And I do think that's like what I do feel confident in is that JJ Redick so far looks like he's just got a better handle on like what the priorities need to be for an NBA team than Darvin Ham did. And that might just be like, that's an unfair comparison because Ham might just go down as like, that guy was just not a good NBA coach or not a good head coach. And Redick is just kind of average. But the contrast is such that it makes Redick seem like, oh my God, he's got it wired. He's figured it out. And like, he's definitely putting forth that detail oriented, like hyper intense, competitive demeanor so far. And that sort of helps, that like adds to the not the legend, but something like that. But yeah, it just seems to me like the Lakers, as long as Davis is going to be like this version of himself, kind of a fully actualized two-way superstar, and is being like not pushed to be that, but certainly like enabled by the scheme and the coach and all that other stuff, then I think you've got to view the Lakers as, right there, even though they just lost this most recent game, like with the Suns, where it's like, I don't know if they're top 4, but they're also not like a 9-10 seed. I don't think. I think they look much more dangerous, and most of that's Davis. And some of it really is a guy like Reeves just kind of looking more like we thought he would a couple years ago.
Yeah, I do. In the macro, we'll see how this take ages. I think they're way better than we expected. And it's kind of been more than just the low-hanging fruit, though, right? Because by the way, they're still not taking enough threes. I don't know if they have the personnel to actually take more threes. But they're actually offensive rebounding. That's a big deal.
A big one.
And like cutting down on the turnovers, that's also been a big deal for them offensively. I think they've dropped their turnover percentage by a full point compared to last season. Again, we have to see if this holds. What's fascinating to me the most, aside from just the Austin Reeves dynamic, is Anthony Davis. It's not even, he shot well on long twos, but his mid-range percentage, the frequency, right where it's basically been, the percentage is still sub 40% overall because he's been struggling from the short mid-range area. I just look at him and this might have been kind of a duh thing to do. So maybe it wasn't the low-hanging fruit, but it wasn't just, they're not only using him. Yeah, the post-up frequency, I believe that is up as well. Elbows, however you want to, like the paint touches, those are going to be up. But also getting him to drive, he's gone from like 3.8 drives per 36 to over 6 drives per 36. And what that does is not only put additional rim pressure on defense, now he's just drawing. He's always been pretty good at drawing shooting fouls. He's currently in the 100th percentile of drawing.
That's a huge, like you start looking for like, where are all these extra points coming from this year for him? It's all free throws. Like he's just generating way more free throws. It's a huge difference. You're right about that.
So I think that's super encouraging because I don't know that he's doing anything that you offensively. We know what he is defensively, but he's not doing anything where it's, this is a mega outlier on offense. If you had to pick one, it would probably be, is he going to continue to average almost 13 free throw attempts per game? No, probably not. But if you get Anthony Davis going downhill, I would think, and I guess could you manifest any concern about LeBron sometimes feeling a little bit like disengaged? I can't get there. He's still shooting 39+% on three. I would say if I had to pick a concern, it's not even D'Lo's shooting. It's just, we've seen some lineups work outside of their core lineup, but I don't know which secondary lineups that I trust the most. And I understand JJ Redick seems like he's still kind of going through the motions with it. But when you look at what there's been, I guess Gabe Vincent he's kind of had like Colin Sexton vibes on defense to me lately, where it's like, he's really getting into the ball, but like sometimes guys are going right around him anyway.
That's a great comparison.
That is someone that I still have questions for. I think it's been great that they've been, Dalton Connect. I don't think he's played more minutes than I expected. I thought Max Christie would be playing more. Is that more of he hasn't started hitting his threes thing yet? I kind of find myself wondering, are they too dependent on Jackson Hayes? But it's where else are they actually supposed to go? At this point, it's, again, the core lineup just seems fine. Maybe Reeves and Rui Hachimura cool off a little bit, but we've been waiting for Rui Hachimura to cool off for like 2 seasons now, ever since he arrived from the Lakers. So I trust this team way more than I did, but I'm still just wondering, like, what is going to be sort of their go-to lineups outside of their core lineup? Because there are some secondary lineups right now. The one where I think if you yank Anthony Davis and throw Jackson Hayes in, like the starters have killed opponents thus far, if I'm not mistaken. All right. Is that something that's kind of going to hold? Like we see bad lineups where, oh, you put Gabe Vincent in for D'Angelo Russell and you somehow got way worse on defense. What is going on over there? I'm very interested to just see what JJ Redick continues to test out. And I'm just wondering, I don't know that we have a timetable yet for his return. Does Jared Vanderbilt's availability impact this at all?
I just don't you think that sort of the combination of the principal guys looking better, that lineup, that starting lineup looking like pretty tightly wired, and the team's success and what seems like a pretty ambitious kind of outlook, doesn't that just mean a trade is more likely than maybe it would have? Like, because there's the constant. Do the Lakers, is the right guy available to justify giving up, what is it, 3, like 2 in a swap they can trade? I can never remember if it's 3 outright
Two,
first.
it's so they can give out 2 outright first round picks plus I think 3 swaps.
Okay. Is now the time, and is the guy available to make that trade? Like, that's been a question for like 1.5 seasons basically. And if this is how it's going to look, then I would posit that like it's just more likely that they pull the trigger on a deal like that because they're a lot closer to being a contender than we thought, or than most, and maybe they thought. I don't know, right? Like, because it doesn't make a trade less likely if you're this good, I would think, if you have all these secondary lineup questions.
No, I think what it might do is make the in between more likely to where
Okay.
it's that blockbuster trade always felt like if it's the right player or someone they deem the right player either for now or they think, okay, we'll get incrementally better now. But if it's, let's just say it's Trae Young, but he's going to be young enough to where he can anchor us with AD
Yeah.
past LeBron. I view it as, okay, are they more like, just as an example, because they're reportedly interested in Walker Kessler, would they give up 1 first round pick to get someone like Walker Kessler in here now because it's, oh, we think if we improve on the margins or if we get someone who's really good in this one complementary area, that will put us over the top. I thought that scenario would have been off the table just because leading into the season where it's, well, why give up the 1 first round pick if you're just give them all up and make the swing? I think it makes it more likely that they might seek those kind of medium grade
Got it. So
like upgrades.
less likely Trae Young, Zach LaVine, more likely Kuzma, Kessler, like that kind of that level of acquisition.
Yeah, maybe, or even just like a Jeremy Grant. And it's even so when you look at this team though, Grant, this might be a good thing to wrap up. It's not, well, what are you concerned about the most necessarily, but what is even their biggest need, or what archetype of player outside of a star would make sort of the biggest difference here? Is it a Walker Kessler? Is it a Jeremy Grant?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would lean more towards, and this is maybe this is because you default here for almost anyone, is like another 3-and-D wing, like someone that is going to make open threes and make it so like Rui or LeBron aren't your best options on, the Jason Tatums or that type of player. I mean, maybe Davis is frankly your best option on any of those types.
That's what I was going to ask. Does it, everyone's going to say, oh, why would you want to give up a first for Walker Kessler? But if you make Walker Kessler like your base rim protection guy, and then Anthony Davis is the guy who's insulating everyone else on the perimeter, which by the way, he's basically that guy anyway.
Right. Yeah. At least he doesn't have to do both going forward. Yeah. No. Okay. The Lakers are really interesting. Like in a genuine way, not in a way that like we must speak about the Lakers. That's a positive.
So we've got news updates here. We'll just go through. I mean, if there's any additional commentary that needs to be had, we will obviously give it. But this function is just a good exercise for us to kind of keep up. It's mostly on injuries, spoiler alert, but also just like if there's any big time rumors, we'll include there. So we can alternate on teams. I will begin with the Atlanta Hawks in the alphabet. Apparently, Bogdan Bogdanovic will miss at least a month after undergoing a non-surgical procedure to address a hamstring injury. That's a bummer for that team. And then also Kobe Buffkin will miss extensive time after suffering a partially dislocated right shoulder for the second time. And also DeAndre Hunter is dealing with right knee inflammation as well. I will say just the number of the potential creators on this team with Bogdanovic and Buffkin out, it continues to dwindle.
That's rough. We'll jump down to the Charlotte Hornets here. Brandon Miller, currently out at least a week with a left glute strain. Probably did it. He didn't actually, but had a phenomenal opening night dunk and was basically not heard from again in that game.
I still haven't watched that dunk. I need to do that.
Gotta do it. It's a good one.
On to the Bulls. Lonzo Ball will be reevaluated in 10 days after suffering a right wrist sprain. He said that playing through it could make it worse. This sucks, but I'm also just happy that it has nothing to do with his lower body.
Right. Yeah. That takes us down to the Detroit Pistons. Asar Thompson still waiting on NBA clearance to return from the blood clot issue that sidelined him all the way back in March. So we're it's just a waiting game, I guess. These are the blood clot thing is always, and basically ended Chris Bosh's career. Like it's such a scary thing. I get the careful approach here.
We already talked about the Warriors a little bit, but just to recap, Steph Curry suffered a sprained left ankle twice in the same game. He will miss at least one more game after already missing that game against the Pelicans. DeAnthony Melton is dealing with a back issue. He's going to miss at least one more game as well, but we haven't gotten ironclad guarantees that this is all the time they're going to miss.
Yeah, that's not on the level of a Lonzo Ball knee injury, but DeAnthony Melton's back has been, especially last year, a major issue. So concerning. The Houston Rockets, a little bit of non-injury news here. If Jimmy Butler becomes available, Houston is considered a team to watch, according to Mark Stein. Yeah, I mean, they got a million young guys to trade. Like you can get there with the salaries for sure. I just don't, and we'll get into this more. We have an extension reaction that will come out eventually at some point. I don't even know what day it is. What is time, Grant? But
it's not happening. It could. I mean, they have that huge Van Fleet salary if they want to, and they have other ways to get there, but I can't imagine that happens mid-season for them.
Is that the Jalen Green trade somehow, some way?
Right.
Butler's just going to be a free agent though.
And also if you're Miami and you're moving Butler, I think you would prioritize, would you prefer having Van Fleet and just the flexibility of his expiring contract? Or do you want to take the gamble on Jalen Green? Plus there'll be other salary in there to make the math work.
I'm kind of fascinated by Jalen Green in Miami as like a cornerstone, if I'm being honest.
That's a cornerstone. On to the Indiana Pacers. James Wiseman suffered a torn left Achilles tendon. He will miss the rest of 2024, 2025, presumably. His contract is guaranteed for this season, which I'm always happy. But the Pacers have a team option on him for next season. So we'll see if it's so cheap. They might just keep him in tow, let him rehab and maybe pick it up, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with that.
Yeah. Rough, tough break for a guy that's had a few of those in a young career. Moving on to the Clippers, PJ Tucker has been granted permission to find a trade, according to Chris Haynes. Sixers, Bucks, Suns, and Heat are all reportedly interested.
I'd like to interject to say that none of those teams are actually going to trade for PJ Tucker.
Right?
There's, first of all, the way that you can't trade with a second apron team while you're like the whole, these teams being subject to the apron. So there has to be a third team involved in most cases. And it's which of those teams has contracts that they want to get off in exchange for PJ Tucker's $11 million. Those all sound like destinations that will want PJ Tucker after he's bought out.
Right. That's if this ends any other way than a buyout, I'm going to be pretty surprised. Also, Randy Shelton, a former strength and conditioning. This is an interesting story. A strength and conditioning coach for the Clippers is suing the franchise and president of basketball ops, Lawrence Frank, alleging wrongful termination, which is in part for raising concerns about the management of Kawhi Leonard's health and injuries, according to Baxter Holmes and Ramona Shelburne of ESPN. Kind of painting himself as a whistleblower, I guess. Although, in reading up, I think it was in Holmes's piece, like his contract had expired and was just not renewed. So like this whole wrongful termination thing is kind of suspect. But just another layer to the whole like Kawhi injury, got his own team. Like all this is just like, I don't know. It's a mess. I don't know that anything's going to come of this, but just another thing to pile on top of the whole Kawhi Clippers saga.
This would have been a topic to get you the gavel and the wig and the robe.
I know.
To really tackle Grant Hughes Esquire over here.
I need to read the court documents.
I'm about to troll the shit out of this team on one of these news notes, but the Lakers, we already mentioned Walker Kessler's on their trade target list per Jovan Buha of The Athletic. We already talked about why. Christian Koloko has been medically cleared to play after missing last year due to a blood clot issue. That is fantastic news. We just talked about how fickle and dangerous and unnerving blood clots can be. However, I'm taking issue with this framing from Shams, Grant.
I knew you would.
This is the tweet. Promising news for the Lakers' development program, which now adds Koloko to recent successes in Austin Reeves and Dalton Connect. Lakers have been intrigued with Koloko, who's expected to provide another center to play alongside Anthony Davis in the front court. This is all due respect to Christian Koloko, has not played a fucking game for the Lakers. So what success is this other than what did the Lakers actively do? Did they go about life-saving maneuvers here with the blood clot? If that's what this is referring to, fine. Dalton Connect has played fewer than 5 NBA games, Grant. The fuck are we doing here?
Well, what we're doing is mouthpiecing for the Lakers and Clutch. Like that's what's happening.
I know what we're doing, but it's exhausting.
It is. When I saw that, I was immediately like, "Oh, is this what we're in for?" Go like with the new news breaking situation at ESPN.
I will say, why didn't Max Christie make the cut then?
Right, rough, really rough. Well, I don't know. Well, who's he represented by? That's probably a factor.
He's represented by
Memphis
Clutch.
Grizzlies.
Did he get a player option? Because I'm not as up on like the agency. I know more.
I'm
Clutch
not
clients,
either. I just,
but
it's just such a like, what is that? I don't even understand what this means about what is the Lakers development program.
I was wrong. His agent is Lacey LaFleur and Kevin Bradbury, so that's why he didn't get a shout out. He's not with Clutch.
Okay,
Time to make a move, Max Christie.
That's enough. That's enough on the Lakers. Memphis Grizzlies. Jay Huff. Have you seen the Jay Huff dunk, Dan? Because that's
I was watching the Jay Huff dunk live.
I was too. I mean, good for him. Didn't see that coming. He was converted from a two-way contract to a standard NBA deal, and I have been converted from someone who did not know who Jay Huff was to a Jay Huff fan. He signed for 4 years and 10.1 million. Like a floor stretching center that can do cool reverse dunks in traffic and block some shots. Like that guy probably should have had a job or more consistently up to this point. We'll see how that works out in Memphis. Also on the Grizzlies front, less exciting. John Morant missed Monday's game with a thigh contusion, I believe is the injury.
For the Miami Heat, this is not injury related, at least. A Dwayne Wade statue was unveiled. He did not look enthusiastic while he was clapping for its unveiling, but he defended the criticism thrown at the artist's way. I'm only putting this in here because I appreciated it. Just as I try to say that all my jokes are in good fun, even when they can be overly snarky or critical. But has Wade basically said, being a player in the public eye, dealing with the criticism, like I know what that's like when people don't appreciate all this effort that you put into something. Mm-hmm. That's his work. That's his recreation of a moment. And I just really appreciated that defense. And it has, as I've gotten older, it's defined how I go about criticism, towards I never try to make it super personal. And I'm not trying to demean or claim that a player deprecate their work ethic or their body type. Not saying that's the right way, but it was kind of just like an aha moment to where, yeah, like that's the memes were kind of funny because it does not look like Dwayne Wade, but it's also, someone did pour probably their heart and soul into that. And so it sucks to troll.
And like, how about let us know next time there's a statue that everyone is like, oh, perfect likeness. It's always this. It's always like, can you believe how ridiculous this, like, what is it? The like the Cristiano Ronaldo one is like the biggest joke of all time. It's just like, that's what you
looks
get.
Like Kristaps Porzingis. Yeah.
Right. This is what happens with statue. That just, okay. Minnesota Timberwolves are up next. Mike Conley says he's been dealing with a little wrist soreness, according to John Krasinski of The Athletic. Stems from something a few years ago. This is what happens when you get old. A few years ago, injuries just show back up. When he's done playing, he's going to need to have it addressed. He's confident it's not the reason for his slow shooting start because he just had it for a while. Not super encouraging, but at least it's not some new acute injury. So that's slightly positive.
This is mostly just a catch up on the Pelicans. I'm hoping. I've not seen anything about Herb Jones's shoulder injury he suffered against the Warriors. Grant, have you? Like, I haven't seen.
No, he had to leave the game though and did not return after like a rough scrum on the floor. Pajemski kind of fell on his right shoulder and it bent in a way that would suggest there's an injury there.
Those Santa Clara alums are just notoriously dirty,
dangerous.
So DeJounte Murray. He will be out at least 4 to 6 weeks after he had surgery to repair a fracture in his left hand that he suffered on opening night because the Pelicans are cursed. In further evidence that the Pelicans are cursed, Trey Murphy, right hamstring injury, will be reevaluated after the first week of November. He is yet to play this season, for anyone wondering.
Former Pelican and current New York Knick, Josh Hart, proving there is curses that follow you elsewhere, dealing with multiple injuries, including a left ankle issue. He's likely to play. You almost got me to read this part. I will just anyway. He's likely to play until he dies anyway.
Well, he was listed as out before the game against the Cavs, I think, and then played.
So doesn't matter. You can't keep Josh Hart out.
We're on to the Sixers. We're still waiting on return timetables for Embiid and Paul George, both of whom have left knee stuff going on. But the team has been fined $100,000 for public statements on Joel Embiid's availability. Per Shams, sources said the NBA's investigation showed that the Sixers did not violate player participation policy. My God. With Embiid's missed games, but in fact, with the public comments that did not properly reflect his health issues with his knee. I don't understand what that means other than did they mislead fans into buying tickets for games that they thought they were going to see Joel Embiid play?
To me, that is exactly what this means, is that the Sixers know his injury is more severe.
Yeah. It's like, so what are they being fined for?
For not saying so, I guess. I don't know. Like, yeah, because it's not... It's just, I guess it's just about underselling, calling it maintenance or whatever, when it's like, no, his knee is not, he can't play. He's hurt.
But like, what the hell? He played in the Olympics, not
Sorta.
well, but
Sorta. He was out there for the most part. Yeah, not great. And you said don't have timetables on either him or Paul George. Moving on to the Spurs, Devin Vassell expected to make his season debut the first week of November. He's coming back from right foot surgery last season. Huge piece, like just a huge piece for the Spurs, because that offense is, I mean, the Chris Paul Wemby pick and roll is just kind of not a thing yet. So we need that creator, that shooter.
For the Toronto Raptors, Scotty Barnes suffered an orbital fracture and will be reevaluated in 3 weeks. That is bad news for Toronto's Raptors offense. That is already bad news in general. So, I mean, everything about their team, well, not everything about their team, but their statistical performance has probably been, look, they had the perfect loss to the Nuggets. Let's force overtime and we're going to lose anyway. There you go.
When you got 4.5 good players and one quickly is already hurt with that pelvic contusion, or has been hurt. Barrett just makes it back
though. RJ, he looks pretty good.
RJ's back. Looks like he might be last year. RJ,
can I very quickly for emotion, and I can cut this if you don't think it's podcast worthy.
Please.
I'd like permission to call Grady Dick rejections cock blocks.
I don't know what else you could even consider calling them.
Have you heard it before? I feel we're the first one to come up with it. We have to leave it in there then.
It's
someone had to say it. It's not.
If you arrived at that like in a tie with, you just need to get it out there so it's attributed to you. I think you're going to want that on, just in your ledger.
This is going to be a terrible segue.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's no good way to do it. For the Jazz, Taylor Hendricks suffered a fractured right fibula, dislocated ankle. One of those like foot's going the wrong way things. And one of the strangest, there was no contact. He was just running by himself and tried to stop, like essentially fell on his own right foot. Brutal, like ugly, scary injury. The good news is like guys come back from this. Like you talk about Paul George, Gordon Hayward, that happens in football. Like Aiden Hutchinson just had the same thing for the Detroit Lions. Like it looks as bad as an injury can look, and then guys do come back. So we like Hendricks. We're rooting for him, but he is going to miss the rest of the season, unfortunately, for the Jazz.
I did not see it. I won't be watching it, and hopefully he falls to the Paul George end of the spectrum, just because he's younger when it happened. Yeah. So hopefully it doesn't alter his career too much. And finally, the Washington Wizards. Kyle Kuzma's out indefinitely after suffering a right groin strain. More shots for Bilal Coulibaly, who just needs to take more shots. He just looks so good on the ball right now. The process is not always, like the end result, I should say, is not always good, but he just looks so comfortable and poised, and I just want him to continue shooting more, but probably more shots for Jordan Poole as well.
Oh boy.
You ready to take us out of here, Mr. Hughes?
Yep. Thanks everybody for checking in with our check-ins. We'll try to do something like this once a week going forward. If you haven't already, please just remember, rate us, review, subscribe, wherever you get your podcast. Positive reviews, especially, super helpful. 5 stars, all that good stuff. Subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you leave comments. Help the algorithm love us back. Tell your friends. Word of mouth is very helpful. Check out our merch. Join our Discord. Links for all that in the YouTube and podcast descriptions. We're almost a week plus in now, so we're ramping up. We're going. Feels like a month. As far behind as I feel about everything going on in the league. Thanks again, everybody. Shouts Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.